The first step on the passion struck continuum is step that I call the mission angler.
Mhm,
And it's really about life crafting the vision that you want your future self to live.
mhm.
And then it's understanding uh, the gap between where you are today and where you want to be. And then starting to deduce what is getting in the way, the self doubt, the fear, etc., that's blocking you from achieving that life goal that you have. And so the rest of the steps then start walking you through how do you approach that.
Welcome to the Create Happy Now podcast, dedicated to helping you start your journey to discover true happiness. Join me, your host, Susan Blanton, weekly as we explore the transformation stories and words of wisdom from our masters of happiness with tips you can start applying today to create happy now. Hey, this is Susan Blanton with the Create Happy Now podcast, and today on my show is John R. Miles. John is a leading authority on intentional behavior change, personal growth, and mattering, is a beacon of inspiration and transformation. As a celebrated leader, captivating keynote speaker, and the host of the award-winning podcast Passion Struck with John R. Miles, he's on a mission to help individuals unlock their untapped potential, challenge the status quo, and embark on a journey towards a profoundly meaningful and purpose-driven life. Recognized as one of the top thinkers in personal mastery and a premier 100 leader, his influence extends far and wide. His podcast consistently ranks among the world's top 100 shows and is the #1 alternative health podcast, offering practical insights for those who aspire to live a life that truly matters. With over 2 decades of corporate and military leadership experience, he's the trusted advisor sought after by some of the world's most prominent companies and visionary entrepreneurs. His leadership acumen has been instrumental in generating billions in sales and advising multiple unicorn startups. Yet beneath these remarkable achievements, John's true passion lies in guiding individuals to live a passion-struck life in every facet. His story, like his podcast, is an inspiring journey towards significance. He developed Passion Struck out of the desire to create an impact by educating people on how to live a life that truly matters, one where they live better, be better, and positively impact the world. Well, John, thank you so much for joining the Create Happy Now podcast. I want to have the listeners learn a little bit even more about you. What got you started on your journey to happiness? Can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, I'd love to, Susan. And thank you so much for having me as a guest and for the ability to serve your audience. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, you're very much welcome. You're our people.
I would say my journey to where I am today started well over a decade ago.
Mm,
I think I was feeling like many people feel. I felt aspects of my life were going extremely well. For me, especially my career, uh, I was a high achiever. I had achieved my aspiration of becoming a C level in a Fortune 50 company. And unfortunately, I've what I found was that in every other area of my life, I was living in mediocrity. I
mm,
was overemphasizing one pillar of my life at the expense of others. But I think, like so many, it is so hard to make that transition. And so, even though I knew that this imbalance was there, I had fear of taking action because action involved change. And you get so caught up in the materialistic and external aspects of what you think are bringing you success that what I found myself doing was I was wearing a mask of inauthenticity. And it was really leading for me feelings of just desperate hopelessness and numbness and just a place that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And my relationships were being impacted. My health was impacted. My spirituality was impacted. And um, that's how I was existing for many years, and I found myself going into a deeper and deeper depression because of it, and eventually the combined burnout that I was experiencing from the massive amount of work I was doing in the position I was in. So
You
I
know,
think yeah, that was
yeah,
the starting point.
that is, I think you're relating to a lot of people out there. I mean, I know you don't wish that on anybody, but I think there's probably a lot of heads nodding out there saying, yeah, I focused on the wrong thing. You know, and we aren't taught balance. You know, we're not taught, oh, there, you know, you need to have this parts of our life in check. We need to have our relationships in check. We need to have our work in check. We have to have our, you know, health in check. It's, you know, pick one, and then you know, it's more of a survival mode aspect. I think that people take one and let the rest go in order to just exist in the life that's given us, you know, and we're not really given all the tools at a young age.
No, and for what it took me was a couple like pivotal events. One was I decided to start meeting with a career coach who was also a psychologist. And so as I was going through these counseling sessions, he gave me the metaphor that I had been living my life as if it was a bar stool that had one fundamental support. And the
Mm,
issue with that is when that fundamental support has any problems in it, you just fall flat on your face. And so he got me to start seeing things in a different way. He got me to visualize seeing myself living my life on a stool that had multiple supports that made up a more balanced aspect of what I was doing. And so once I kind of got that in my mind, I started to make some small changes to lead me more in that direction. And the first I pursued, like many people, was trying to get a better grip of my health. And the way I was doing that was trying to get into a better exercise regiment because I had put on weight because of the chronic stress that I was dealing with, and I needed to deal with the stress, and I wanted to feel better and look better and everything else. So I had gotten into this great regimen of going to Orange Theory quite frequently, and it just so happened it was a typical Tuesday, just like any day of the week. I dropped my daughter off at school, headed to Orange Theory, and right before the class was about to start, we started smelling like an electrical type of smoke. And it turns out that there was a short in their air conditioning box that was in the room, and they had to call the fire department. And so the fire department came, and we all had to exit. Obviously, can't class was canceled. And so I ended up heading home about 45 minutes earlier than I typically would have.
yeah.
And unbeknownst to me, there was an intruder who had been watching my patterns and
Oh my
had just so happened to pick this as the day that he was going to go into the house because he knew that I typically would be gone for this period of time. And so I entered the house and walked in on an in-house burglary going on, and I didn't realize it at the time. So I wanted to go switch gears, and because I couldn't work out there, I thought, I'll go on a bike ride instead, just so I can get some type of workout in. And as I was going up the stairs to my bedroom, I have a staircase that had a 90-degree twist. And as I rounded the corner, I started hearing heavy breathing at the time that I was about to round the corner, and was as if time just stood still for a second. And all of a sudden, my military training kicked in. And the first thing I did when I rounded the corner is I knew something was absolutely wrong. And so the first thing I did when I navigated it was I did kind of a shift in my body position as I came around and looked for threats. And I saw a gun in his hand pointing down the stairs. And so
Oh my.
I reacted just as quickly as I possibly could because I had two options. I could either charge him or I could try to do a maneuver and get out of there. And I quickly just processed in my head that the chances of me getting up the stairs and not being shot were pretty low, and so I decided to evade and fight another time. And um, coming out of that, I don't think it hit me at first. My daughter later came home, and I think the realization started to dawn on me. You know, what happened if she had been sick that day, or something else had been different in the moments that occurred. And as I was processing this event over the next few days, I ended up spending time with my best friend all day Saturday, and then uh, was starting to feel a little bit better about it because I was able to talk it out. And on that Monday morning, I flew to New York and was about ready to enter a meeting when all of a sudden my phone started blowing up, and I happened to just have to take a phone call because I was worried what was going on. And it turns out that that friend who I had met with had decided to take his own life. And so, in a matter of 5, 6 days, I had the suicide of my best friend coupled with this life threatening event all impact me at the same time. And really coming out of that, and it didn't happen all at once. It took me a while to really process the grief. And I remember not being able to go up into my room. I would just sleep on the couch because I just couldn't get it out of my mind that this person had been in my room. And as it turns out, had been in the house weeks before, canvassing it and trying and understanding what their path was going to be before they came in a second time. And so, as I processed this, I really had this complete clarity that the life I was leading was not the life that I was destined to leave or to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really resulted in me devoting myself to mindfulness, to yoga, to inner practice, and 2 years of just really deep down self awareness and personal growth to understand where I was, but more importantly, to life craft where I wanted to be in the future. And I knew at this point that my life's mission was to serve others. And it now became not a matter of if I was going to serve others, it was then how do I go about doing it?
How
So
and what and yeah. So did you what did you do first to transition from corporate to being an entrepreneur serving your passion?
that is never an easy transition. It reminded me a little bit of coming out of the military and trying to transition into something else. And so what I ended up doing is I started a company, and I was one of the first who was ahead of the curve on what's now being called fractional executive work. But I started myself becoming a fractional executive,
What
but
is
I
that?
started a so I would or the people I had on the team would go into companies, and we would often go into small, medium sized businesses or startups and perform executive roles that they couldn't afford to do on a full time basis. So it could be we were performing the chief financial officer, the chief marketing officer, the chief technology officer. But typically it would be either for a shorter duration of time,
Hmm,
or you would do 10, 15 hours a week, and spread that across multiple clients.
I see.
My specialty was really going in and turning around companies. So a lot of times I was hired by private equity firms to either go in as the chief operating officer or the CEO to temporarily, typically anywhere from 12 to 24 months, go in to these companies and turn them around.
Mm.
And so that's where I got my start. And it just happened to be that one of these opportunities that I got was to work for a company that not only had a consulting practice, but they also had digital publications that they ran as well. And I was asked, in addition to doing aspects of the fractional executive role, to take on being the assistant publisher and eventually the interim editor in chief of the publications. And I think it was during that time that I really started to see the power of content and that we were really in a content uh, transition where it was going to become its own market in the future. It already was. And
Oh,
so I started to see that by putting out content, I could serve an audience. And so that eventually led me to starting my own podcast, the book, and everything that I'm doing now. But it was kind of that transition of steps to that epiphany when I was doing that job to understanding that there is a whole new opportunity out here to be a content creator and to do something that I love that could impact a lot larger amount of people if I did it well.
absolutely. So you have now you have a book, right? The Passion Struck book you have
I
behind
do.
you. People on the podcast may not be able to see it, um but I wanted to learn a little bit more about your book. So when did you start writing it? How long has it been out, and what can they find in the book?
So the book actually launches on February 6th,
Okay.
2024. So it's not out yet. But this has been something that I say has been in the works for decades.
Yeah.
But it really started because my community started coming to me and asking me to write a book. And I remember originally having some ideas about it during COVID. But as I was starting to talk to agents and circulating the book proposal, I think, like a lot of people, I had spent so many years in these corporate environments where they didn't really want you to have a personal brand that
Mm,
I didn't really have much on social media at the time. So the agents were asking me very logical questions, such as, how do you know that anything that you write about or talk about is going to resonate with anyone? And to be honest, I honestly didn't, because most of the public speaking that I had done before that was talking about digital transformation or big data or
mm,
things that were related to the
business
companies
world.
that I was working with. And so, given at that point we were unable to do keynote speaking, or it's hard for me when you're in a virtual environment to really see how an audience is being receptive to what you're talking about. So I decided to, at that point, launch a podcast. I spent about 6 months researching podcast and eventually decided to take the blue pill and go down that path.
And your podcast is also called Passion Struck? The same.
Podcast is also called Passion Struck. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Um, so what's the platform of your podcast? What have you been talking about there?
So I think, like anything, we evolve over time.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how you felt with your podcast, but when I started, I found that I was putting out some quality content. But what I observed about 4 or 5 months into it was that I was mimicking other hosts that I liked and trying to take things that I was seeing them do and apply it to my show. And a light bulb kind of hit me one day that people don't go to Susan's podcast because ultimately you have President Obama on the show. They don't go to Jay Shetty's because he's got Mel Robbins on the show, or Mel Robbins because she's got Oprah. They go because ultimately they like the host and the lens through which they do the podcast. And so for me, that was really an epiphany. And from that point forward, I started to do everything really through the lens of how do you create an intentional life?
Yeah.
And so the way I decided to approach it was that I've seen so many personal development podcasts that talk a lot of things, but they don't really back it with any science or deep ingrained psychology, etc. And so I decided that I was going to kind of do a mixture between bringing experts in the fields coupled with people who the audience could recognize as themselves, who made incremental changes to their own lives, completely turning around their destinies. So you could learn from the experts, and then you could see how people applied these different techniques in their own lives. And from that point forward, it just started taking off.
Yeah, I mean, it's much similar to what we have here at Create Happy Now. I mean, we like to hear everybody's different story to happiness, what was their pivotal point and what made them, change and turn around, and what obstacles did they overcome, and what made them decide to serve. There's so many people that have just completely changed career paths, and has decided to start, either helping people with healing or coaching, or they've written a book, or or a keynote speaker, or maybe they're channeling their higher self, or channeling a certain, you know, entity. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. Um, but yeah, I mean, so now you have come up with this podcast and the book that complements the podcast. And so tell us a little bit more about what they're going to find in your book.
So oftentimes you get that question, what would you tell yourself if you were 20 years old again?
Yeah.
So I have a 25-year-old and I have a 19-year-old.
Hmm.
And so as I was going through this, I wrote the book for them. And it's not only for their generation, it's really for anyone, anywhere in their lifespan. But I wanted to give tools that I used, and more importantly, that I saw others who had turned their life into something that was successful, was meaningful. And I kept seeing these patterns emerge. So, what the book contains is 12 life principles, and I organized it in three parts. The first part, I go through 6 mindset shifts.
Hmm.
The second part, I go through 6 behavior shifts. And then the third portion, I go through what I call is the psychology of progress, which is really how do you take deliberate action in your
Hmm.
life. And so I wanted to give 2 chapters that really grounded people in behavior science and techniques that they could use. And then more importantly, once you've laid out this framework, then how do you actually apply it in your life? So that's how the book is laid out.
So what are some of the things that, besides I know you had consulted with a psychologist or counselor, that was helping you. um I'm sure you did a lot of your own self study. What are some of the things that you either discovered on your own, or you've stumbled upon as interesting resources?
So, like many of the people who are listening to us today, I have experienced significant trauma in my life. And not only the incident that I had with the intruder in my house, but combat trauma
Mhm.
and other physical assault trauma. And what I learned is, like many people do, I thought I could handle the adversity and the past trauma on my own. I
Mhm.
thought that I could suppress it. And for me, when the death of my friend happened and this near death experience happened, not only over a period of time did it reawaken trauma, but it brought forth much of this trauma that I had been suppressing for a long time. And
Mhm.
so I went through a very significant period of therapy where I did cognitive processing therapy,
Okay.
prolonged exposure therapy, EMDR, other modalities, and all these things are not easy. The cognitive processing therapy really got me to see the stuck points that were really inhibiting me from getting from where I was in life to where I truly wanted to be. And a lot of them dealt with trust issues, etc. I think the prolonged exposure therapy, if anyone's done that, was probably the worst aspect of it because you basically are taking the worst event that's ever happened to you and reliving it over and over and over again
Mm.
until it becomes a non issue. But having to go through that is a really painful experience while it lasts. But on the other side of this is so much post traumatic growth. And that is what I have experienced. And that is what I try to share through the lessons that I talk about and the lessons that I share in the book.
Yeah. I'm sure being a guest on a podcast telling you to tell their story is partly healing and partly, it's a reminder. So it's a launching pad every time, to remind yourself of where you've been and where you are now. And you probably had to relive that quite a bit for your, that part of your therapy, correct? To go through your trauma
Yeah.
related.
I mean, for the better part of 2 years, yes.
Yeah.
Or
So now you're on the other
however long
side
it
of that.
takes.
It doesn't, how is it now reliving it now? I mean, having you retell your story again.
So I don't think it ever completely goes away.
Mm.
But you learn to not let it define you anymore. You learn not to bury those emotions and instead to use them as a learning opportunity and a way to see your life in a different way. And so that's how I've chosen to approach them, as growth opportunities, as reasons for me to help others who have gone through terrible situations like I've endured, who might be feeling like they're the loneliest person on earth, like they've got no one they can turn to, like they're helpless, like they're beaten,
Mhm.
battered, broken, whatever it may be. And to help people realize that no matter where you are at, um, you have the strength inside to forge a passion struck life again, to create a life of meaning and significance where you're not only serving yourself, but you have this innate potential to serve so many others through the skills that only you were put on earth to fulfill. And that's what I try to help people understand is what they can do to then make those skills come alive.
Yeah. And we're all so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for. And um, a lot of it has to do with just finding that part of ourselves that we can learn to love again and be more softer and patient and loving to ourselves for having gone through that. And then patting ourselves on the back for also going through that, and that we can persevere and move on and get past it. So that's really powerful. I like that. Um, so so you're on your way to having this book launched in February. So where are we going to be able to find it when it's finally launched?
So it's currently available anywhere you would purchase books. It's on Amazon, Walmart, bookshop.org. But right now, if they purchase it on my website at passionstruck.com/forward/slash passionstruck book, I am giving over $300 in free gifts
Oh,
as an
wow.
incentive to pre-order it. So it includes some really great things. One, you get access to chapter one of the book, but above that, I did a master class that they get access to
Hmm.
of 7 ways to find their purpose. I have 2 incredible ebooks. One is on a process that I describe in the book, but I don't really go through how to apply it, called the deliberate action process.
Hmm.
So this is a 50-page workbook that has all kinds of worksheets that take you through how to utilize it. And then I have another ebook on how to create intrinsic motivation, either in your professional life or your personal life, that also has a number of worksheets throughout it that will guide you on the steps that you can take. So, and then a couple other things as well. And then I also have a quiz I've developed to help people understand where they are on the passion struck continuum. And in the book,
Mm.
I go through 5 different plateaus that people find themselves in on their road to becoming passion struck. And so it will tell you not only where you're sitting, but what you need to do action wise to get you to the next level.
Why do you think a lot of people aren't taking action?
I think we get stuck. We end up feeling like nothing that we do matters, and we over contemplate in our minds what action needs to be. We think that it has to be this huge step into the unknown, this huge progression of upheaval. And what I think the secret is to taking deliberate action is to train yourself to take small incremental steps along the path to becoming what you aspire to become. And I think that's where people really screw up, is they try to see this as too big a leap, instead of, if they just did 1 or 2 small actions and learn to train themselves to be more deliberate and intentional about the actions and choices that they're making on a daily basis, the more every choice you make is a choice to either stay where you're at, or it's a choice to grow. And so I talk a lot about the importance of micro choices that we have all around us in our daily lives. And to me, that's the crux of it. It's making 1 or 2 small choices to take action that takes you in a different place. And what I found is, no matter where you decide to take that in your life, whether it's the first step is you want to exercise, or the first step may be you want to become a better learner and just start reading books, whatever that first step is, it ultimately impacts multiple areas of your life, because it fills you with intrinsic motivation, which then will prompt you to do other things outside of that initial action area. And it just compounds over time.
Absolutely. There's so many different things that you can do. I mean, you don't like you said, you don't have to make a big leap, but I think if you write down how you want life to be like, how do you want to feel? And then if you can try to feel that feeling now as if it's already happened, then what you want starts to show its path to you. But you have to calm your mind, to and love yourself in order to have that path reveal itself and give you clues on, oh, let's say, which way should I go? I don't know. But when you can be calm, you can feel your your intuition, that wisdom inside of you that you can become more and more dependent on instead of having to seek validation, ask everybody, which way should I go? Which way should I go? Instead, you know what feels right. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I started this juncture in my career, I had so many what I call are pain in the asses in my life who were trying to be the glass half empty, saying, if you do this, you're not going to be making as much money. You're not going to be able to afford the lifestyle that you had. And what happens if it goes wrong? Or what happens if it does this?
Hmm.
Or if it fails, what are you going to do then? And I think you reach a point through self love, self work, that you start really trusting your own instincts. But more importantly, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they try to give themselves all kinds of fallback plans. And for me, one of the most important things I did was just going for it and
Hmm.
not giving myself a fallback platform and having that mental tenacity that hell or high water, I'm going to find my way to making this work. It might mean that I have to do shifts along the way, but I feel compelled to do what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm going to turn this dream into a reality.
Right.
And I think a lot of people go into this and they try to soft step their way into it. And I personally think that that's a mistake. Not everyone might have the resources to do it, but in my case, it was really giving myself just this no chance that I had a safety parachute and that I had to figure it out and that I was going to use this passion to drive me to take the financial risk, to take the emotional risk that it was going to take to try to live my dream out.
And I think part of it has to do with, I mean, follow your passion, follow your bliss, and without expectations, to not be attached to the outcome, but because you might have to pivot, and detour to get there. You might be going, oh, I want to write a book. Well, I might write a couple ebooks and before I get to the big book, or I might be teaching a few little classes before, I have a big overseas retreat, or you may not end up going that way, and you might end up volunteering and doing something else, to leave it open. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to conceptualize because they fear not knowing what the 5-year plan is. I think more and more people are learning how to maybe do a 6-month plan.
I have a chapter in the book that's called the Bee and Turtle Effect. And in that chapter, I really go through a deep dive into Elon Musk
Hmm.
and some of my interactions that I've had with him in the past, because this is something that he uses uh, quite proficiently. And what the whole chapter is about is that you have this beehive, and the bees are extremely intentional about the actions that they have to take on a given day in serving the queen and serving the hive and
Hmm.
in keeping that vibrant community together. And then on the other hand, you've got the tortoise who has this long view, slow approach to the goal that they want to undertake. And so to me, it's how do you maximize them both? And how do you learn to take the small daily intentional actions that lead you over time to that aspiration that that tortoise is going to fulfill? And this is something I really perfected when I was an executive, because I found myself, I think different people have absolutely different strengths, but one thing for me was whenever I saw a problem I was able to see that solution years ahead.
Mhm.
But what I found was that a lot of people couldn't make that connection. And when I started to talk about things in terms of 5 years down the road, people couldn't comprehend the actions on how to get there. And so, what I learned how to do is to boil this down into weeks, months, and what the pivotal changes you need to do to get to one stepping point. And then once you get to that one stepping point, you can then unveil the next 6 months, hit those, unveil the next one. But oftentimes we have this aspiration that I think is fine to visualize, this big goal that we want to achieve. But sometimes you can really create roadblocks in your way too if you're not seeing that incremental progress because it's so far out there that you're not seeing that the progress that you're making is making a dent into it. And so this is where I introduce this deliberate action process, which allows you to break this down into much shorter sprints that you can take where you assess where you're currently at, you prioritize the immediate actions you need to take, execute them, measure them, and then keep repeating this. And by doing so, you make incremental progress. And after a while, it just takes off like a wildfire, and you keep going farther and farther and farther on the action steps that you're taking through the process.
I think it also takes a lot of being able to be resilient upon, being open-minded in case something comes up that may take you on a different path that's better than the path that you had thought was going to be, a great path. Let's say if you thought that you were going to become, a keynote speaker and that's what you wanted to do and just travel the world, and then you decide you don't want to travel, you'd rather have group meetings at home, or maybe you wanted to open up your own shop. I mean, there are so many different avenues that can come up, and you have to still reach in and decide, I may have met this person, and then this person had me meet this person, and then you you want to be open to, well, there could be a situation where I might find a new passion. I might be another fork in the road that I didn't even realize was my passion until I recognized it. But you have to be open to those situations. Otherwise, you might miss that opportunity if you're not keeping your mind open. For example, just I ran into a woman that I happened to meet at another place, and now we're going to be doing retreats together. I had planned on doing it myself, and so I think that there's a 5-year plan, or it might be a 10-year plan, but it's like, how do you want your life to be in general, and not have the attachments? It's going to look a certain way, but it's, maybe you're going to have more financial freedom, or maybe your relationships are going to be a lot less chaotic and more loving and supportive. But you don't know who those relationships are going to be with. It could be your immediate family, but you might have additional people that become really close friends. So that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, the first step on the passion struck continuum is a step that I call the mission angler.
Hmm.
And it's really about life crafting the vision that you want your future self to live.
Hmm.
And then it's understanding uh, the gap between where you are today and where you want to be, and then starting to deduce what is getting in the way, the self-doubt, the fear, etc., that's blocking you from achieving that life goal that you have. And so the rest of the steps then start walking you through how do you approach that. So how do
Right.
you confront fear? How do you reinvent yourself and learn to be a constant reinventor? How do you audit out these bad influences, toxic relationships, etc.? How do you start shifting your perspective? How do you create action? How do you get yourself to start getting in that optimal performance zone so that you can stay there and learn how to put yourself there? So that's kind of the progression of steps that I take in the book.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Well, John, so tell us again the website they need to go to pre-order your book.
Well, I'm so excited that I've got an advanced reader copy here in my hand, but it comes out February 6th. And right now you can pre order it anywhere that you purchase books. But if you go to the Passion Struck website, passionstruck/Passion Struck book, and you put in there where you order it, whether that's bookshop.org, Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, you then can get access to over $300 worth of free gifts. And if while you're there, you can also go ahead and take the free quiz that I have on the site that will tell you where you are on the Passion Struck continuum.
Awesome. Awesome. So I ask all of my guests, what's your favorite quote? So if you would like to share with us.
Well, I have a ton, but I'm going to just read two here. They're from, one is from my favorite authors. This is from Robin Sharma. And he says, one of the saddest things in life is to get to the end and look back and regret, knowing that you could have been, done, and had so much more. And then another quote is from Abraham Maslow. And this is the story of the human race. It's the story of men and women selling themselves short. And I think both of those to me are great quotes because they give us a reality check that so many of us are settling for mediocrity when we could be pushing ourselves to create the life that we've always dreamt of having, the one when we were a kid that we dreamed of, and somehow along the way we've let go. And to me, the core message and the message I convey in the book is that it's possible with intentional action to do it. Anyone can do it, regardless of where you're at in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When now, the other thing that I want you to share with the audience that I have everybody share is your happy hack.
So to me, I think people look at happiness in different ways. And to me, I don't consider happiness as a constant state that you're in. I find that when I'm most happy is when I'm feeling awe or a positive emotion in some way. And so for me, the way that that happens the most is through acts of service or observing other people do acts of service for others, where you witness the awe of the world around us. And I think the other way you do it is through the intentional relationships that you're part of and just finding ways to bring yourself closer to friends and family members that bring you joy and contentment in your life.
Yep, absolutely. Well, those are great, great happy hacks always. Well, thank you so much, John, for joining us on the Create Happy Now podcast. And everybody reach out and on the URL that he just gave us, I'll have it again right here so that you can jump in on this opportunity now and get $300 worth of extra bonus gifts. And John, it was very much a pleasure having you on the show. And I wish your book and your podcast all the luck and growth and abundance. And I wish you well.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure to be here. And congratulations on the great podcast that you've created.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Create Happy Now podcast. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you are watching on YouTube, hit that notification bell. If you have a topic to suggest, please leave a comment below. Catch the Create Happy Now podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, and Podchaser. Check out other YouTube videos on the Create Happy Now YouTube channel. And if you want more, check down below for resources, courses, and events, or go to www.createhappynow.com.